Viewer discretion is advised. I do not claim ownership to any of the images, music, or copyrighted material used in this video.
Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange, starring Malcolm McDowell, and based off the majorly controversial novel by Anthony Burgess. Welcome everybody to CinemaSlot's all-time top favorite movies and albums. This is a segment on my channel now, a brand new segment on my channel no less, in which I basically talk about my favorite movies and albums. It's pretty straightforward. It's out of my top 30 favorite films and albums of all time, just keep that in mind. And before we begin, I want to lay down a few basic rules on how I do my own version of my top favorite movies and albums. 1. It has to be a movie I can rewatch just about any time, anywhere, in any sort of way. And number 2, it has to be a film that means a little something to me deep down. And third, I've got to own it on Blu-ray. That's pretty straightforward, right? Anyways, what can I honestly say about Clockwork Orange? It is one of the most talked about films of the past 45 years. And if anything, it's one of those movies that really sticks with us as time goes on. And it's all thanks to the director of this movie, Stanley Kubrick, for being one of the most visionary directors of all time. Some of his all-time greatest films include Full Metal Jacket.
Where in hell are you from anyway, Private? Sir, Texas, sir! Holy dog shit! Texas, only steers and queers come from Texas, Private Cowboy!
2001: A Space Odyssey.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
And you can't forget The Shining.
Here's Johnny!
So with a background and a legacy of a filmography like that, you would expect Clockwork Orange to be another one of those milestones in motion pictures. And while it definitely is, and whenever you talk about the film these days, this is a movie that continuously gets praised, and in most ways it's often considered Stanley Kubrick's best film, which I would argue it is. He is truly one of my all-time favorite filmmakers, and one of the few filmmakers that has left a tremendous impact on my life, and what eventually led me to want to pursue my life as a filmmaker and theater actor. Now, with all that said, Stanley Kubrick is one of the most popular and most talked about filmmakers of all time as well. And this film is often considered his ultra masterpiece, which in many regards I would argue it truly is. The film stars Malcolm McDowell as the young 14-year-old troublemaker known as Alex. He runs a gang, and they do basically nothing but cause trouble all around town. They steal cars, they beat up other gangs, they feed on the innocent, and they break into houses, they rape women. They basically do any kind of bad thing you can possibly think of under the sun, for 1971 at least. And the film follows the character of Alex through his long journey in life, through going through multiple different things in his life. From feeling like he's the king of the world in which he can do anything he wants and loving violence to the everlasting loads of it, to the point where he is stricken of his rights, and to the point where he can't even touch anybody without feeling sick to his stomach, all because of a certain treatment that apparently makes you immune to actually cause violence. All leading to where you almost feel sorry for this poor kid as he causes hell, he goes through treatment, and then he goes through an unbelievable hell that nobody could almost be able to live with, to the point where he almost tries to kill himself to end it all, right there and now. Now you may be wondering, what is it about this movie that would make you want to watch it if it's just dread after misery and just really depressing emotions all throughout? Well, I feel like I have an answer to that. It's because this isn't just about some kind of supervillain that's trying to be making himself all good and undo all the bad that he's done. No, this is about a kid who pretty much is born evil. He pretty much acts like a sadist. He is a sadist in every stretch of the imagination, and once he goes that one step too far, he gets caught, and then he is forever changed after that. And we see that throughout the rest of the movie, after let's say the first half an hour or so, we see the character of Alex go through prison, we see him go through the Legato treatments, and we see him go through the pain and agony of not being accepted by his parents, not being accepted in society by whatsoever because of all the bad things he's done, to the point where the people who either worked with them or dreaded them in the past are trying to kill him now because of everything he's done. And the film is an interesting thing to think about when questioning human rights and where do our actual rights actually go into. But what really drives this movie, the film that really keeps you on the edge of your seat all the way through, is the character of Alex himself, played by Malcolm McDowell. His performance is practically perfect in every stretch of the imagination. He narrates throughout the vast majority of the movie, but he also offers, dare I say, comedic timing in his speeches, which is weird to think, seeing how he is a psychotic nutcase. And the most disturbing thing about it is that Alex enjoys it. He enjoys bringing all this misery and pain to all these people that he just tortures and does all this senseless violence to them. And of course he has his group of droogies that are always along with him for the ride. And yet, you can find him amusing in some places, and that's what I think is another interesting thing about his character. While he is sadistic, he is a charmer with women at times. He may be a complete nutcase, but he listens to Beethoven. He feeds on the innocent, but is sympathetic, well-spoken, and somehow a little bit intelligent.
Oh, bliss. Bliss and heaven. Oh, it was gorgeousness and gorgeosity made flesh.
He actually does think about things a lot, even if he does go take things the wrong way a lot of times throughout the movie.
Oh? And what's so stinking about it?
But that's what makes this movie interesting, is his character, let alone. Granted, the vast majority of the cast does an excellent job all throughout, but he is the one that we all remember the most because of Malcolm McDowell's trademark characteristics put into his acting here, and just the journey that we go with him. Because we practically go on this journey where he does all of these terrible things and then becomes this upright citizen that is not accepted in any stretch of the imagination. And what's really interesting to note also is that even though this is a Stanley Kubrick film and it is very artsy, and yes, it is a very artsy movie, but it's not artsy heavy like some of his other films are. Like if you have watched films like 2001: A Space Odyssey or Barry Lyndon or anything like that, you will be able to survive this one because it's not that artsy by any stretch of the imagination, even though there is spectacular camera work used all throughout the movie, a spectacular musical score that's mostly Beethoven, but it just sounds incredible all throughout. Most notably, the Ninth Symphony being played all throughout the motion picture. And also, Stanley Kubrick's just absolutely crazy imagination of bringing this very controversial subject matter and book onto the big screen in such a limelight. It's a riot, and that's the best way to describe it. It's Stanley Kubrick's riot. And it even went on to be nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay, all of which Stanley Kubrick could have won, but he never did, unfortunately. And the only Oscar he's only won is for 2001: A Space Odyssey for Best Visual Effects. It's also interesting to note that when it first came out in England, it was actually not really treated in the most respectable manner. In other words, it was very harshly treated because of its subject matter, and because around that period of time, once the movie came out, there were a lot of people who basically did imitations of the killings and rapes and murders and everything that happens in this movie, and they would dress up like the characters in the movie. It's actually kind of sick when you think about it. You can watch and listen about that more in the documentary Stanley Kubrick: A Life in Pictures, in which they talk about that whole controversy. But just so you know, because of how violent this movie is and how just the most mentally disturbed people out there just looked at this movie as an inspiration to do all these terrible things made Stanley Kubrick want the public to be quiet about it, that he pulled the movie from theaters in England. It's a very interesting state of mind that the director pulled a movie from theaters because of the press it was getting. That's a significant power that not really any directors do anymore these days, I feel. Even if we don't really need to worry about that as much as we did back in 1971, when just about anything you released was very controversial. Especially when, at the time, this was considered the most violent movie of all time. Which I would still say, it's probably still up there as the most violent movie ever made. There's really no other words I can use to describe this movie. It's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece of art, music, visual directing talent, and acting. It's definitely not for everybody, granted, because of how violent and sadistic it can get at times, and it can even get very sad and depressing towards the end of the movie. But if you're willing to look past all that and look at a piece of film history, this is a movie to definitely check out. And the Blu-ray, I have to be honest with you guys, watching it on Blu-ray for the first time, it was almost like rewatching the movie for the first time for me. It was such a great experience, and like I said, it's a life-changing experience for me. It may not be for you, but for me, it was a life-changing experience to experience a movie that was this violent, and yet such a rewarding experience on top of all that, which is a weird thing to think about in a film like this. But anyways, guys, that's how I feel about Clockwork Orange. It is one of my top 30 favorite films of all time, and it deserves a 4 out of 4, A+, 10 out of 10, however you want to put it. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching my review of Clockwork Orange on my favorite films blog. Tomorrow, I will have my first episode on my all-time favorite albums of all time, which is going to be on Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses. So look out for that very soon, guys. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching, and as always, if you want to see more, you can click the subscribe button below, and stay tuned for more future videos. Thank you, everyone.